Thank you, Sarah, for that kind introduction. Let me acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara peoples of this fine city. I thank the Media Club for this invitation. I've been here, this is my third appearance. So I reviewed my remarks from the two other ones, and you're going to get a facsimile. I just want to say I'm really pleased my colleagues from Cape York, the mayors of Lockhart River and Aurukun will join me. So last time I was here, 2017. The Uluru Statement from the Heart had just been delivered in May of that year, and I appeared before this club in August. This is what I said. So to this club I say, you are Queenslanders. We need the people of Queensland, the media, the political leadership of this state to be at the forefront. All of the great issues in Indigenous affairs have happened in this state. Eddie Mabo, not the least. All the great changes and the reforms have come from Queensland, and we need this club and this political leadership to understand that we must lead the country. We must lead the country. This is a chance that comes around so infrequently. We're in the 10th year of our advocacy of this opportunity, and I feel that within the next year, we have the real opportunity for Australians to put their hands up for this reform. And as I say, this is a question ultimately to be determined by the Australian people. And I believe the Australian people yearn for the resolution of this issue. What is this whispering in our hearts that the great colonial lawyer Richard Windeyer asked in Sydney town in the middle of the 19th century? He said, but what is this whispering in our hearts? And so we have now a real opportunity, as long as the politics can thread together, as long as we have the goodwill and not the cynicism from our public commentators and the media and political leaders, I believe we can reach a genuine reconciliation of the original peoples and this great nation. Well, those 12 months passed and we're 6 years later. But we've now got legislation passed by the Albanese government to put to the Australian people the recognition of the first peoples of the country in our founding document. We're going to do something that is going to be the most important event in the 250 years since before Cook came. Out of all of the years of any kind of European involvement with this continent, this vote in the referendum will be the most important. What we do in this referendum will be absolutely momentous. It's our one chance. Certain generations, it falls to certain generations to make history, to seize history. And it's fallen on us. There's an old struggle. It's a struggle that will continue, but we can resolve it. We can resolve that struggle. It is within our reach to do that. The provision is modest but profound. It asks modestly the country to amend the Constitution so that whenever the government in Canberra and the government and the Parliament in Canberra makes policies and laws affecting First Peoples, they should receive advice from those First Peoples. That advice can be taken or it can be left. That's up to the politicians. The parliamentarians we elect will have the responsibility of continuing to be our democratic representatives. All that is sought from the voice is the ability for those communities to give advice to the Parliament and to the government of the day. The provision concerning Indigenous people in the Constitution is a provision that we activated in 1967. It was the race power, Section 5126. And Section 5126 is a kind of unique provision in that it gave the federal parliament the ability to make special laws concerning race. Now, originally in 1901, that provision, 5126, was not intended to apply to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, because in that provision was a specific exclusion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders from that power. What 1967 did was include us under the 5126 power. The original purpose of the race power was in fact directed at Chinese. It was directed at immigration and voting rights for Asians. That was the intention of 5126. It was not directed at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It was directed at Chinese immigrants and to exclude them from certain privileges, not the least, the right to vote. So 1967, we removed the exclusion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and the Parliament for the first time had the power to make laws about First Peoples. When the Parliament exercises that power, as it has with the Native Title Act and with the Indigenous Land Corporation and with the Indigenous Business Australia, all of the special legislation affecting Indigenous peoples, those laws only apply now to Indigenous Australians. At its root, the voice is about saying, okay, the federal parliament has a special power in relation to First Peoples. Should we not have the ability to give you advice about when you exercise that special power? So it's very important. The Parliament has a special power in respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We want an ability to give it advice whenever it exercises that. A completely reasonable proposition. We also want to advise the bureaucracy, the government. And you will hear from the mayors of Cape York how vitally important it is that the communities have the ability to talk to the bureaucracy and to make government partnerships with their community. The bureaucracy needs to listen to communities if we're going to close the gap on disadvantage. So the work that we've done over the last 20 years in Cape York, directed at reforming the relationship between government and the communities of Cape York, yielded an idea that is a very simple idea, but has been adopted by successive governments here in Queensland. And it is the simple idea that when we talk about giving people a voice to the bureaucracy and the government, we simply want to sit down at a table with them, a four-sided table. We want the community sitting on one side of the table with its agenda, with its intentions, with its aspirations, with its ideas. The community is sitting on one side of the table. They wanted the other side of the table, the Commonwealth Government, its representative, to sit at the other side. And they wanted another side of the table, the Queensland Government. And on the fourth side of the table, they want their own local government to sit there. And they want to talk about plans for the community. They want to talk about floodlights for the sporting field at night. They want to talk about sorting out land tenure for the old people's home. They want to talk about what are we going to do to tackle rheumatic heart disease, which children get in early childhood and they drop dead of when they're in their 30s. We've got to eradicate. We've got plans to eradicate rheumatic heart disease, which is a disease you'll only find in sub-Saharan Africa and in India and in other poverty-stricken places on earth, but no more in Australia other than Indigenous communities. There are a lot of problems to address and a lot of opportunities to seize. We've been doing great. We have got such important young trees growing in Cape York. The Mayor of Aurukun, my colleague, has her son here with us at this lunch, who's at Brisbane Boys College. And she's had two of her other sons graduate from that great school. We've got hundreds of kids in the best schools in Queensland graduating. We have, one of our girls is doing her PhD in Stanford in law. We've got a lot of exciting things happening. The crucial thing, if we're going to close the gap, is we need the scale. We need to scale the good things. And that means we need the government to work in partnership with us. Not work against us. Work in partnership with us and follow us. Don't try to lead us anymore. Follow us. We know what we're doing. We'll close this gap. You can't rely on anybody else to close the gap other than the people who are affected by the problem. And that's what we have in Cape York. Leadership that's affected by the problem. So I want to say to this club, I'm so very pleased for your invitation. The country will change. So far as the First Peoples of Australia are concerned, the country will change after October. And it'll change for the better. And we will either have contributed to the new future or we will have wasted the opportunity. The last time I spoke here, the Uluru Statement from the Heart was released 2 months before. The Uluru Statement from the Heart was an invitation from the 3% of the country to the 97%. An invitation to walk towards a new future so that we can put the past behind us. Always remember it, but never be burdened by it. And that's the promise that lies here. We're going to be very, very aware of our past in the future, but it will no longer be a burden. We're going to put the past behind us and reach for a new future. Queensland's ground zero. We've got to get it right. We've got to bring the people of Queensland with us. Eddie Mabo and all of the great Indigenous heroes that we follow in the footsteps of, they're Queenslanders. The champion Indigenous leaders, they come from Queensland. And they've laid this opportunity for all of us. Let me say one last thing. 97% means, and 3% means we can't win the referendum. Our numbers just don't count. It's your 97% that counts. You, the white fellas. You're the ones. I can talk all I like. But, I only represent 3%. It will fall to you, the 97%, to decide whether we seize this opportunity. Put aside the misinformation and the exaggeration and everything else. I can't do anything about that. There's no use me talking about that. All I can talk about is the positive opportunity that's available to us as Queenslanders, as Australians. And I feel the people in this room have a particular responsibility to our state. We've got to, sometimes we've got to lead. We have to lead. History calls upon us to lead. And not waste the opportunity. So thank you very much to the Queensland Media Club for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Pearson, and a call to arms to Queenslanders. Please take a seat on the stage, and I'd like to invite our other two guest speakers to join you now while I give you a little bit of an introduction about them. Today we've got the rare privilege of not only hearing from Mr. Pearson, but also from two more Cape York leaders who have travelled a mere 2,500 kilometres to talk to you today. Please welcome Aurukun Mayor Keri Tamwoy and Lockhart River Mayor Wayne Butcher. The mayors will join us on the stage for a conversation that goes beyond the politics to get to the heart of the debate from the people on the ground. Wayne Butcher was just 18 when he was first elected to council in 1989, and now he's serving his third term as mayor of the Lockhart River Aboriginal Council on the far northeast coast of Cape York. He has kin ties to the Utanganu and Umpula people of that region. He's a member of the Local Government Association of Queensland's Policy Executive and a board member of the Pooya Foundation. Councillor Butcher is passionate about building the next generation of leadership in his community, which is home to about 700 people, most of whom are under 25 years of age. He's had real success in building local economic development and encouraging the creation of Indigenous-owned businesses in Lockhart River who are literally building their community from the ground up. And he strongly supports the recognition of First Nations people in our Constitution. Aurukun Mayor Keri Tamwoy is of the Putch clan of the Wick Nation on remote northwestern Cape York. She's a qualified mediator and a culturally recognised taupunt, a peacemaker. Not only has she raised 6 children, one of whom is here today, she's also the co-founder of the Wick Women's Group, which champions the education and safety of women and children, and she's a local Family Responsibilities Commissioner. She was named National NAIDOC Person of the Year in 2021 and was recognised for her reforming leadership. Councillor Tamwoy wants to reform the structures that keep her community shackled to unbearably high levels of unemployment, greater than 80%, and says she won't stop until her own people have power over their lives. And she follows in the trailblazing footsteps of her mum, Aurukун's first woman mayor, Alison Muller, who told her, "Your voice is your most powerful tool." So we often hear from critics of the voice to parliament that it won't lead to practical change on the ground in our most remote communities. And now that we can hear from the leaders of some of our most remote communities, I'd like to know, I suppose, first from you, Councillor Tamwoy, what kind of practical change do you think that the voice could foster in Aurukun?
Hello. Oh, thank you. I guess one of the practical change that could happen is that real partnerships happening on local level, on the ground. Yeah. Yeah. And when we use the word partnership, we talk about stakeholders and whoever else that we need to have involved, sitting around our, fireplaces and experiencing what we, go through on a daily basis. And I guess, that would lead into a really good partnership on a local level.
And you said to me before that you've been waiting for this for a long time and you're sick of just speaking to the middleman. Tell me a little bit about, what you would say to the leaders if you had the opportunity.
If I had the opportunity, I would say to those leaders that they need to actually come into our very remote communities to experience what it is that we go through on a daily basis. We don't talk about the suffering of our people enough. They really need to come in and experience and the way that we live, the way that we struggle, the way that we try to make ends meet. And with me, I don't waste my time talking to the middleman. I go straight to the top because I know that's how I get results for my people in my community, because that conversation will never be diluted by a second or a third party.
Councillor Butcher, for you in Lockhart River, what do you think are the real practical changes on the ground that could come about if there is a voice to Parliament?
Firstly, I just want to acknowledge the traditionals of this country and all our elders past and present, coming from Cape York. We're kind of it's a bit cold down here, but it's a beautiful country too as well. Two things I battle with is it's first follow Noel's speech, and I've known Noel since the 90s, 1990 I think, but at Cape York Land Council in Lockhart River. The second is after a big lunch siesta. I got to try and battle with that now. But look, I've been, as Sarah mentioned, I've been the mayor of the Shire now for 3 consecutive terms and 1 unopposed term in the middle. And I've been going to Canberra in that whole 12 years too as well, I guess, and knocking on the doors at the Parliament House, talking to I guess a lot of 3 different ministers, Indigenous ministers in that 12 years too as well. And I guess the norm practice of policy or of investment is always been from the top down. So when you look at the remoteness of Cape York and some of our remote communities, the gap between Canberra and Lockhart River or Aurukun or Hopevale or Konyama, some of the, and even the remoteness of Arnhem Land and the Kimberleys as well, is that the norm practice of decision making has always been that we know what is right for you. So we're always at almost on the rough end of the pineapple when it comes to receiving some of these policies, you know. So I guess the challenge is that no one listens, and you never get heard anyway if you do speak. So when I've seen this voice come to the forefront now, you know, and all the experience I've had of talking to ministers in Canberra and also in Brisbane, you know, I sort of think, well, whenever you guys out of the corporate world and even the educational section, no matter what organisation you manage, you want to be effective, and you want to be efficient, and you want to look at sustainable long-term growth. You can't fluctuate like a roller coaster in your organisation or in your community, because you'll never achieve anything. So I guess this is the same argument we're having now, is that we've seen legislation such as that at federal level with ATSIC, an example, but also at state level with ACC and ICC under state law. Government creates legislations, they can take it away when they feel like it. Depends on the government in power at the time, whatever the flavour of the month would be. But if the Indigenous Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people in this country is enshrined into the Constitution, then I guess you have sustainability, you guarantee sustainability over a long time. And that's the only way you can influence change. You can only influence change for the better if you have stability.
Thank you. Can we have an extra microphone up here if there's one floating around so that we've got one for each of us? I wanted to ask Mr. Pearson, it's a weekend, we're already a bit tired since the official campaign started. How do you think it's going? Are Australians going to vote yes? And you mentioned the fight needs to be fought and won in Queensland. Does the campaign need to be tailored specifically for Queenslanders, and how do you do that? That's about 47 questions, so sorry about that.
I'm feeling good about the campaign, and I'm feeling that over the next 3 months, if we project the messages of how important this is for the practical benefit of communities, particularly traditional and remote communities. I can't emphasise enough. I work with people throughout the Kimberley, throughout the Northern Territory and Cape York, and I've got to emphasise for those communities, this is the last great chance, the best hope we have for those communities. So it's crucial we get this right. We've got to get the message out there of positivity, not be dragged down by negativity. Our message has got to be one of friendship and hope. Whatever fears are being generated around the countryside about the voice, I think we've just got to take the view that our message of unity and trust and friendship will prevail over the voices of fear and contempt. That's what we have to do. And I'm feeling good about that message. I'm starting to see evidence of it amongst our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters. But one thing I can't release you from is for you to take responsibility. You, the white fellas, have got to take responsibility for this. This is your constitution, this is your nation, and it's your children's future that depends on this, to get it right. So, Sarah, you know, it's going to be a hard 3 months, but I believe that a campaign based on positivity and friendship is ultimately going to prevail over the voices of fear and prejudice.
Now I'd like to throw to my colleagues in the Queensland Media Gallery who are at the table at the back. They're going to ask some questions of our esteemed guests.
Hello, Kate McKenna from the ABC. Mr. Pearson, thanks for your speech, and great to hear from Mayor Tamwoy and Butcher as well. Mr. Pearson, you've said Queensland is ground zero. Are you worried at all by the recent polls which consistently suggest or seem to suggest that Queensland could be the state least likely to vote for the Voice, and why do you think that is?
All of the states are a challenge. Changing the constitution is not easy. We need a majority of voters across the country, but we also need a majority of the states. So 4 states are needed to win a referendum. I come to you, and Keri and Wayne do as well, as Queenslanders. Eddie Mabo was a Queenslander. We would like our own state to back us. We would like our own state to own us. This is the ultimate state of origin, this referendum. And our state of origin is Queensland. If we're going to achieve reconciliation, if we're going to achieve an understanding for the future, we need to show the way here in Queensland, and I believe we can. We don't have the political leadership, or we don't have as much political leadership as we would like, but I believe that with the support of the Queensland community, we can get it right. We can get Queensland on board for this change. It's a crucial state. And not for a minute do I believe this state is lost. Absolutely not. We've got the fundamentals of a win here in Queensland. I'm just asking Queensland to own the legacy of Eddie Mabo, to own the legacy of John Kowata, to own the legacy of Evelyn Scott. All of our great leaders are here in Queensland, and I'm sure as hell going to be pushing as hard as I possibly can with my colleagues to get a win here in Queensland, because this is our home state.
Hello. Sorry. Oh, here we go. Thank you. I'm Eden from The Guardian. Just had a question about, the Palaszczuk government is obviously supporting the Yes campaign on The Voice, but they haven't committed to raising the age of criminal responsibility. They don't want to go it alone on that. How do you think that that kind of policy fits with The Voice?
I'll just make an example, if that's okay. In Aurukun, we've been talking a lot about LORE and how that fits into LAW. So I guess, if we get The Voice, if we get it, it would mean that in my own community, we could make better decisions about how can our young people, how can LORE speak for them instead of LAW, and in that way we will make them responsible with our own LORE, because I believe that that needs to be recognized too. I hope that answers your question.
I'll just follow on from Keri there. The unfortunate scenario we're looking now with youth crime in the state is, I guess the old word discipline is something that a lot of us in the older age have grown up with. I tell every principal that come to Lockhart, bring back the cane. You know what they tell me? We can't incite violence. Or you better turn off the YouTube channel then. The cane never killed anyone. I can't remember killing anyone in Lockhart anyway, but it taught them discipline. I think I'd say to a lot of my, there's 17 Indigenous shires in Queensland inside the 77 shires as members of the LGAQ. The answer to, I don't like calling it a problem, but I love to more be on the positive note of calling challenges, So the challenges we have in our respected community, no matter which community you're in, the answer lies within it. It's just about giving the opportunity to those respective community to have the chance to bring the answer to the table. And that unfortunately what we haven't been able to be given, is given that opportunity. Noel touched on an important thing there, partnership. How long we've been screaming for partnership, proper, tangible partnerships on the ground. So how many prime ministers we've gone through lately, how are you going to build partnerships when the leadership change at a drop of a hat? So when you get good leadership, you get that window of opportunity, and it's that window of opportunity that you've got to capitalize on. So and that's how we see the referendum right now. It's a window of opportunity, and we as Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people need to capitalize on it. But we need the rest of Australia also to come with us. Because it's about a future, it's about the future. It's what we want to see our children, our grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. How are they going to live into the future as one Australians? That's the main question. We can't continue to be judged by the colour of our skin. We need to be seen as Australians.
I'm very confident we now have a very good campaign infrastructure behind us, and all over the country people are being mobilised towards the referendum in 3 months. 3 months is daunting. 100 days sounds like not much time, but in terms of the energy we have to put in, it's a very long time. But we're very positive about the state of the campaign now. One of the disciplines that we're committed to is to keep our eyes on the prize, and not be distracted by the ebb and flow of the polls, and not be distracted by the politics of all of this. We're out of the politics now. We're out of Canberra. Canberra's behind us. The politicians have had their role, which is to pass the bill. It's now over to the Australian people. And of course the politicians will continue to say whatever they want. We've got to focus on the Australian people. This is not a federal election. This is a referendum. So my message to Conservative and Liberal voters, or people who are inclined towards those parties, is to say to all those Liberal and Conservative voters, this is not the time to choose between Liberal and Labor. That's not the choice here. You can do that at the next election. You do that at the next election. This referendum is about the future of Australia. So you need to step out. It's a bit confusing. This is not an election. This is about the future of Australia and the Constitution. And we need to kind of leave or temporarily put aside our political preferences and see ourselves as Australians here who are trying to think about a new future so far as First Peoples are concerned. And that's a message we've got to get through to people, right? Yeah, you can vote for the Nationals, you can vote for the Liberals, you can vote for Labor or the Greens at the next federal election, but this referendum is about you and me. It's about the First Peoples and the rest of the country as Australians, and how we make the joint even better than it is. How we can make our Commonwealth, how we can perfect our Commonwealth, make it better. And this is the opportunity we have.
Mark Ludlow from the Australian Financial Review. I might start with Mr Pearson, then move to the other panellists. Obviously there's been some high profile companies which have come out and supported the voice. Some have donated money to the cause, and for that they've been attacked by the No camp, including the federal opposition leader. Other companies in Queensland have not taken a position. They've said they're going to leave it up to their staff to decide how to vote. I just wanted to get your opinion on whether you think that companies had a responsibility to get behind the Yes campaign in the same way that pretty much all of them did for the same-sex marriage campaign a few years ago.
You know, I think it's the staff of those companies that I'm concerned about. I want to get a message to them. As citizens, as Queenslanders, as Australians. The choices made by the company boards and so on, that's up to them. But I want to speak to their staff. I want to speak to them as Queenslanders and as Australians. I'd like Wayne, Keri, myself and all our colleagues across the country to have the opportunity to talk to your people. That's the most important thing from our point of view, to give us a hearing, to give us a chance to talk to Queenslanders and Australians in their workplace, wherever they might be. And that's what we're going to be doing over the next 3 months. Our priority, you know, the position that companies take is not nearly as important as their people. We need to talk to their people. And we want an opportunity to put our case to them. The ordinary people who work for big companies, small companies, whatever, we want the opportunity to talk directly to them and for them to hear from people like Keri and Wayne and so many other campaigners across the country, to hear from them why this vote is so important and why it will deliver practical good for our people.
For me, I think it's exactly what Noel said. Yeah, it's good to have the support of big companies, but it's the people that matter. It's the people's votes that will matter, you know, in the referendum. So I guess just what Noel said earlier, yeah.
Look, I was yarning to someone earlier about the way of doing business into the future, and I'm a big fan of innovation, you know. A lot of people say, you know, think outside the square, and I always say, well, why put the square there in the first place? And that's the way, I guess that's the way I see when the corporates and some of the big companies get involved, because for us Aboriginal communities, we've only dealt with one group of people, and that's been the government. And the government's way of doing business has always been paternalistic. We know what is right for you. Never, that's why we talk about modern day partnership, never ever come and said, how can we work together to address the challenges you have in front of you right now? I've spoken to ministers for years. I used to be the CEO of the Shire there for, 4 years in the late 90s into the early 2000s in the Aboriginal Council structures. But the way of doing business has always been the same. So when investment leave Canberra, and a lot of people say, you Aboriginal mob, you get plenty of money. But when money leave Canberra, it has to come to Brisbane first. Then when you're in remoteness, it goes to Cairns before it gets to Lockhart. So you just imagine how many people have taken a bite of the cherry on the way through. So, you know, and then you wonder why. Look, there are great investment in health, in education, you know, more than we ever had. And I was having a yarn with someone the other day about, in Cape York and Torres Strait, the health is worth 430 million or something, you know, in that. It would be cheaper to give everyone a health card at a ceiling of 50 grand each and go, you go buy your own health. Because of that structure, everyone's investing in the delivery, not the outcome. The life expectancy of an Indigenous male adult of Cape York at the moment is down to 55 years old. I'm turning 53 next month. But, and you know, there's some really sad figures out there. I've traveled the world and I've had the opportunity to travel Australia too as well, but there's no place like home, you know. And when I come back home and jump under the shovel and bury people younger than me, some days I go back, lay in bed and go, what the hell's going on here? But that's where we're at. By saying no, what are you saying no for? What's the alternative? Is there any alternative out there? If they want to make it a political football of the campaign, then Dutton put something on the table. You know, just like any debate. You know, you've got to have an alternative. If you don't have an alternative, well, we can't stay in the position that we are right now. The last 10 women we laid to rest in our community in the last 5 years, there are only 3 elderly. You know how old the other 7 was? Under the age of 45. Now, I can go on forever and give you stats, but I'm not interested in stats. I'm interested in how we can improve into the future.
Yes, please, Keri.
Can I say something? The multi-million-dollar healthcare system that we have in place for our people is failing us miserably. Like Mayor Butcher stated, he's had to bury his own. I've had to bury my own. When I go home, I've got to prepare for 2 funerals, one on the 14th and one on the 20th. And I sit here with heavy heart because how many of our people must continue to die well before their age, before Australia does the right thing by us? We are all Australians. Thank you.
I might throw to the media table for one final question.
Just a question to the mayors. What are the residents of your communities saying about The Voice, and do you think there will be widespread support for it in both of your communities?
I think it's only common sense. There's a 2 way of looking at it. We stay the way we do business right now and invest in failure. If you invest in failure, the outcome is inevitable. It's going to be failure. So there's only one choice into the future, and the choice is to change the way we do business right now, whether it's with the federal government, the state government, or with fellow Australians. And the only people who can help us pass that post, as Noli said, it's not a political election here, it's a referendum. There's a moral question on the table here. In our language, we call it puya, your heart. that's where your decision got to come from.
I believe most of the people in my community will vote yes. And any that may have questions about why we're voting yes, you know, why it's important to vote yes. If any of my people have any of these questions, then it's as easy as sitting down and talking with them. And they will see why it is so important to vote yes. And I'm just going to add something. On Saturday, I saw a very lovely thing with my son and his friends, boys that are non-Indigenous. And when Noel was talking about we're all friends, then that undiluted respect and love that was shown between the boys, they didn't see color, they didn't see race. They just saw another brother. And I know that my son regards his friends as brothers. And that's what we're asking for, the brotherhood and the sisterhood. You know, we are relying, and I said this before, we are relying on the good hearts of everyone here in this room and anyone else out there that you all can influence, you know, to vote yes. Because our lives are important too, just as much as all your lives are important.
One last word from you, Noel. Were you reaching for the microphone?
The polling that we've done over the last 4 years has consistently shown that Indigenous people are plus 80% in support of the voice. Absolutely no doubt about that. Indigenous Australians, First Peoples, want this voice to happen. They support the invitation of the Uluru Statement to the rest of the country to unite in this modest but profound idea that the First Peoples should at least be able to provide advice to the Parliament and to the government about matters affecting them as a people. So there's just no doubt that our communities are in favour of this voice. But like any family, right? I've got a big family of brothers I love very much. And some of my brothers are more interested in fishing than politics. And they support the voice, but they take minimal interest in its details. It's like everyone else, right? Not everybody is as obsessed with politics and policy and details and so on. What they know is that the voice is something that we've been calling for a long time in our communities. They're aware of that. I'm just so convinced that our people will find this very, very useful for us. The voice will be very useful for us to make good in this country, to come good, to take our rightful place in the country. And I think it'll be a beautiful adornment of our Constitution, quite frankly. I don't know how many of you have ever read the Constitution, but it's like the rules of cricket or the rules of golf. It's about that compelling. And all of a sudden you'll come across this new provision in Chapter 9. Your children will read this new provision in Chapter 9 after October, and they'll think, oh, so this is what Australia is. And I really think that that's what we're going to do at this referendum. We're going to add a little bit of soul to our founding document. If there's one place they'll find something to reflect on, it'll be in this provision that Prime Minister Albanese has put forward for the country to consider. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our lunch today. Please join with me in thanking Noel Pearson, Keri Tamwoy, and Wayne Butcher. And I'd once again like to acknowledge the naming rights partners, Brisbane Airport Corporation, Before You Dig Australia, and Griffith University, as well as all of the rest of our event partners and my colleagues in the media. Thank you all for coming, and the Queensland Media Club looks forward to you joining us at future events. Thank you very much.